This hole is called the puke hole.
So what goes in there?
Well, I think when you're done eating, and if it was a really good meal and you really filled up, then you have to throw up. And you puke right there. It goes outside the castle.
Oh.
Pretty smart, huh? Make a puke hole in the dining room. In this video, we're going back in time to a land of dragons, knights, damsels in distress, and valiant deeds.
Also a dragon. There's also a dragon. After that, it goes up there.
To the mythical province of Limburg, the Netherlands. With over 120 castles. There were over 120 castles in this little dongle province that's smaller than the state of Rhode Island. Look at these. Yeah, you can build stuff with these blocks.
What if we build this castle?
Through the ages, from around the 10th century all the way to the Renaissance and Romantic revival interest in castles in the 20th century, that led to some of these fancy-looking houses, looking at how changes in warfare, politics, and social structure led early medieval castles to look something like this, and then much later, Romantic revival castles to look something a little more like this. The location of Limburg is kind of at a pivot point between various large powers that have ruled over the area, to include the Romans, Franks, Holy Roman Empire, Carolingian dynasty, Habsburg Spain, among many others. So building castles for control in the region has always been tenacious. The earliest castles in Limburg were built primarily for defense and control over the surrounding lands. These structures were often basic fortifications made of wood, earth, and simple stonework, some of which were of a motte and bailey design. This would typically have been a wooden or stone keep on raised earthwork called a motte, and then a separate section with an outer bailey or a ring wall to fortify food production, such as a barn or a farm or where people would live, or some with a bailey surrounding the motte. Good looking motte and bailey castle, huh? What do you think?
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Many would have used timber at this time, which is why there are very few well-preserved examples from this period throughout Europe, as most of them were built on top of or destroyed. That tower is called the Keep. So this is kind of cool. We just stumbled upon this castle called Wijnandrade, and we're just out for a walk and we found it. And it's actually an example of an old motte and bailey castle where you got the motte remains over here, and the current building is where the bailey would have been, for the, kind of like a castle farm. So pretty cool. Yeah, what do you think all this stuff is? Does it look like a broken pot or something?
What do you think this is?
One of the oldest surviving castles in Limburg is likely Kasteel Keverberg, which has an excellent example of a surviving motte, along with some very modern additions from the 21st century. And right behind me you can see a good example of a hill that the castle's built on. So that would be the motte, and then the wall around the exterior that would be guarding the agricultural production, or a farm or a barn or something like that would be called the bailey. And this castle was destroyed in World War II. They rebuilt it with kind of some modern additions. This is the oldest part of the castle. Apparently it's built in 950. Another good example of a motte in Limburg is at Kasteel Limbricht, which dates back to around the 10th century, when it would have likely been a wooden tower and an outer wooden bailey. Today, Kasteel Limbricht, along with many of these castles, is a nice place to stop in for a snack, or in this case, one of their homebrewed beers on site. Many of them are now frequently used as wedding venues, or bed and breakfasts as well. The High Medieval period saw the development of more substantial stone castles, but still characterized by smaller territorial disputes, and the need for greater security and control of the nearby land. More architectural elements like Roman arches, columns, and turrets were used. Kasteel Hoensbroek, one of our absolute favorites for visiting with kids. Construction likely started in the 13th century, and the current high round tower dates back to 1360. It is one of the best preserved examples from this period, although it has undergone several expansions through the subsequent centuries.
Nice.
Yes, this part was built a long time ago, because it's always been a strategic location between Aachen, Cologne, and Maastricht, and it was named for a knight named Herman Hoen, the first lord of Hoensbroek. So basically all that's left is the old foundations and then the big round tower. So the round tower is the oldest part that we climbed up. And the wall in that round tower is almost 3 meters thick. It's like the size of probably almost like a horse. That's how thick they are. Like how tall a big horse is. So this is our third visit to Hoensbroek Castle, and it's a great one for kids because they've got all kinds of activities outside and indoors for kids to do. Here we got it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Valkenburg Castle, which was started around 1075 on one of the few naturally defensible hilltop positions in the Netherlands, is a good example of early stonework being used. The late medieval period was marked by changes in warfare and political organization. The rise of professional armies, gunpowder, and cannons made traditional castle defenses much less effective. As a result, the military importance of castles also began a slow decline during this period. The gradual centralization of power and the establishment of more stable political entities reduced the need for private fortified structures. Local lords were increasingly absorbed into larger state structures, such as the Burgundian Netherlands and later the Habsburg Empire. As a result, many castles were expanded to include more comfortable living quarters, large halls and chapels, as they began to take the shape of what we more commonly see today. Extravagant living quarters for rich folk, projecting their wealth, power, and status. Built in the early 17th century, this is a good example of the transition between a fortified medieval structure and a Renaissance residence, reflecting both military and residential features. The castle is completely surrounded by a moat and includes many features of what is now known as the Mosland Renaissance style, including these bacon layers with red brick alternating with Namur stone, a regional light-colored limestone. Kasteel Terworm is another example of a 15th century castle originally built for fortification that has later been converted and renovated into a large mansion complete with a French Rococo garden. During the Dutch Golden Age, the Dutch nobility and wealthy merchants further transformed castles into luxurious country estates. They became summer residences or country retreats, far removed from their original defensive purposes. Inspired by the French chateau style, many Dutch castles were redesigned with a focus on elegance, symmetry, and landscape design. The surrounding lands were often developed into extensive gardens or hunting grounds. Features such as moats were retained for aesthetics. Many castles also fell into disrepair at this time, as the cost to maintain these elaborate structures and gardens became too burdensome, even for the rich who owned them. Kasteel Arcen was built in the Baroque style, and the modern gardens give the feeling of what it might have been like to stroll through some of these elaborate and extensive castle grounds. Of course, they didn't probably have these modern sculptures back then. This castle started out as a motte castle, but the castle was considerably embellished around 1775, with an exterior door in the Louis XV style and French-style gardens. They were really into the French style around this time. The 19th century saw a romantic revival of interest in the medieval architecture and castles, spurred by a fascination with chivalry and medieval history. Some existing castles were restored, while new structures were built in a neo-Gothic style. The Montfort Castle was originally built around 1260, but like so many castles, it fell into disrepair in between periods of interest. Around 1850, the famous architect Pierre Coppers probably designed the octagonal tower as a hunting lodge. And the castle has since gone through other renovations as an event venue and attraction for tourists. So this is Kasteel Vaeshartelt behind me, and this is one of our prime examples of the Romantic Revival period, which is kind of this period in the 19th century, 20th century, where castles are way past their usefulness as wartime or strategic military positions, and now they're just fancy houses. So this one was bought by this famous industrialist from Maastricht. Petrus Regout desperately wanted to belong to the nobility of Maastricht. He had enough money and good contacts, yet he was never admitted, since the established nobility was too bothered by his boasting behavior. He bought the castle as a proxy for King William II, who was the king of the Netherlands at the time. And I guess the king came out here on a couple trips, used it as his hunting grounds, just a place to get away, I think, from North Holland. And nowadays it's just a really cool castle to visit. It's got a hotel inside, which looks like a great way to spend a romantic night, maybe not with the kids, away. Really nice restaurant, and then a big conference center as well. And then it's just got these huge grounds that are super nice to walk around and play with the kids at. Andreas is running around and having a blast right now. What else did I want to say? Inside of this castle has some really nice additions from an interior design standpoint. They revitalized a lot of the old French stuff, back to that French design in here. So I guess it's Louis XV style and Empire style, but then it's got a lot of these modern additions that look really nice, I think. Again, I think it'd be a great place for a romantic getaway as a couple. My throat's been sore a little bit lately, and these things have been a lifesaver. They're like black licorice flavored cough drops. I've been eating them like, I don't know how many a day. They're a lifesaver. I love all the Dutch, is it anise? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Anise? Black licorice flavored stuff. So good.